Okay, great. I think we'll start, everyone. And I'm Dennis White from here in Charles City, and I just want to thank everybody for showing up. And what I'd like to do is introduce Mr. Bob Moen, who is the president of the American Passenger Train History Museum and the owner of the property on 11th Avenue and North Grand. And I'm going to let him proceed from here.
Well, good morning, good evening, everyone. We're here to see what we can do to save this depot. So, just to give you a little background, maybe start flipping slides, I guess. Let's go to the next slide. We're a group of guys who became fascinated with passenger trains as kids. That's how we got into this. We were pretty much like this little guy here in the dome car, totally fascinated and enthralled with what we saw. And we ate in the dining cars and with white lemon tablecloths and heavy silver cups and stuff, and we were just totally impressed, and we just never seen anything quite like this as kids. And so trains also could take us to places we'd never been, kind of there were magical things, and so we were just totally enamored with them. So by the time we became adults, we were still interested in trains, and then we found out we could own a train car. And boy, that's when trouble started. So that's kind of how we got into this. We found out we could own one, and then we found out about another one, and then people called us about a third one. Kind of like they call us about this depot. So anyway, moving on here. So I purchased the Charles City Western Shop and Yard from Nam Foss back in 2003, and we've been collecting and restoring cars here ever since, because Charles City was a wonderful place to work on cars. We don't get a lot of vandalism here. The cars are pretty safe. And it gave us a place to actually, work on them. Recently, we began to think about, we're putting all this work into these train cars, what's going to happen when we're gone? Maybe we've got to start making plans for what's going to happen with these cars, and that's where the idea of starting a museum got started. And so we've been working on that for the last year, trying to get incorporated, trying to get 501c3 status. And our goal is to preserve and display a sample of cars from famous trains from the 1940s and 50s. And the prime audience of people for a train museum is grandparents and parents with young kids. That's 90% who comes to a train museum. That's 90% of people who go to a tourist ride. Like I was on a tourist railroad this weekend, and we had to wait for all the passengers to get off, and it was pretty much little kids with their parents and grandparents who were on there. So, and we want the kids to be able to touch and see the trains. So the idea would be that if we had the depot, people would walk through the depot, buy their ticket, maybe look at the gift shop or look at some displays in the depot, and then they would go out to the trains, and they'd be able to walk through each of these four trains and see how they were each different. Each railroad marketed their train differently. Each railroad had different interiors, different things that make their train the train you wanted to ride versus their competitor's train. And this would be the only railroad museum in the country that's focused on passenger trains. There's a lot of railroad museums in the country, but they pretty much have locomotives, cabooses, and freight cars. And that's fine, but that's not what people touched. That's not what people rode. And so that's, I think, what makes our museum unique. It would make people come to Charles City from a great distance to see this, because other railroad museums simply don't have. They might have a coach or a sleeping car, but they don't have the whole train. And a train really is the whole thing. If you don't see the whole thing as a unit, you don't really understand what it is. And so our goal is to preserve the history of passenger trains, and we decided, we've been working on preserving it ourselves, but we're going to have to go to the next level and create a museum so that this will continue beyond us and have cash flow and have support and continue. So go to the next slide here. So the trains that we're going to preserve is the Milwaukee Road Hiawatha's, which you've seen some of these cars out here on 11th Avenue. Next one. The Rock Island Rockets. Next. The Burlington Zephyrs. You see a couple of the Zephyr cars on 11th Avenue too. As a matter of fact, this car right here is on 11th Avenue. It was in this picture from the 1940s. Next picture. And the Great Northern Empire Building. We've got a couple of cars from the Great Northern Empire Building here, including one of the dome cars. And then go on to the next picture here. So how do we get involved? We heard about the depot was up available 7 years ago when the railroad first contacted the city and started talking about the need that there might be that they would like to get rid of the depot, and would the city like to have it. And I don't think the city quite knew what to do with it. Ron Turner and I were talking about this at the time. You may remember Ron was very interested in trains, used to stop by and see what we were up to pretty much on a regular basis. And we talked about it, we were like, where are we gonna find the money to do this? How do we do this, you know? And so we just decided, well, it's probably kind of hopeless is what we were thinking. So then this spring, I was hosting my open house here for friends and stuff, and word came that the Canadian Pacific was now serious. They were planning to take the depot down in a matter of weeks. So when I got back on Monday, I called Tim Fox here to find out what was going on, and he informed me, kind of updated me on things. And I talked to Mark Wicks, and he gave me more information. And then I called Canadian Pacific and kind of got the lowdown from where they were. They were planning, they pretty much said they were going to tear it down on the 5th of September or sometime this week is what their plan was. So I said, well, we'd be open to taking it as part of our museum, but we don't have the resources to move it or restore it. We could have volunteers, we could help, we could manage it, but we can't do this. So the thought would be, well, maybe, so I thought, well, maybe, I don't know quite what to do. Well, then my phone started ringing off the hook a couple weeks later as people got word of what we were up to. Dennis called me, and Eric Merrill from the Charles City Facebook page called me, and I started getting calls from a number of people saying, is there any way you can do something about this? And I again said, well, we'd be open to it. We don't have the resources, but we can provide a purpose. Well, then it started to occur to me, everyone's kind of looking at us to make this happen. And so then we realized, okay, we got to take this project on. We've moved train cars. This is no different than moving a train car. We're just going to call the contractors and find out what this is all about and what it would take to do it. And so I got a hold of Canadian Pacific again and got them to stall off their demolition. And now I've gotten them to stall off the demolition a little further, given that we're getting organized now. So we basically have till next spring at this point. But at that point, I think they're going to get to the point where they're just going to call the records. So at least we stall them off from this September to next spring, maybe June, maybe something like that. So I think if we get the money together by then, we could actually make this happen. So let's go on the next slide here. So what we can do, and the sun is really helping us with the slides here, I see. But anyway, we can provide a place to put it. We did look around at other sites around near us, and it seemed like nobody really wanted it. And so we realized we're going to have to put it on our land. And so we can provide a land for it. We could manage the project. We know how to move things. We are now set up as a 501c3 Iowa corporation, nonprofit, so we could handle the funding, the money part, and give people a tax donation for donating to the project. And we could provide an ongoing purpose for the building. And also we could provide volunteers and cash flow to maintain the building off into the future. So we actually, this is a great synergy really, putting this depot with the museum would really be a great thing. And we were skeptical at first because we didn't feel we had the financial wherewithal to do this, but we're now starting to think, well, this really would be a great fit and would save the building and give the building a purpose. So go to the next slide here. So our plan, the Canadian Pacific will donate the building as long as it gets moved off their property. It cannot stay where it is there. There is no negotiation on that point. They want it off their property. And the reason is because their legal department is concerned, let's say it was a restaurant and then the train derailed and wiped out the restaurant, they'd be liable for it. So they want it gone. So, because I would love to be able to just put up an 800-foot fence and buy the building for $1 and go forward right there. And years ago they did do that, but I think they found out they'd rather have it gone. So our plan is to move the property a block and a half south to our property at 11th and Grand, which is right next to the Charlie Western Station and Office Building, which is now Ackerson Insurance, the Ackerson Insurance Building. We just move it right alongside of there, facing the same way, but instead of facing the Canadian Pacific, it'd be facing the Canadian National tracks across the street. So it'd still have trains going by, but it wouldn't be on railroad property, it'd be far enough away for safety and liability and all that. And we would have to remove the track on our property, and then the station could become the entrance to our museum, and the station would retain its historic floor plan and appearance because we'd use it the way it was designed. The next slide here. So this is, I think you gave me is this what I think it is? The pointer? This is wonderful. Push the button.
Should get you a little
Oh,
bit
there
of
we go.
God.
Well, there it is.
Someone's not helping again.
Yeah, it's not very...
I can maybe...
Well, there's the depot there. Okay, there's the depot. We take it down Grand and put it here at 11th and Grand right here on this on this spot right here. Now I got another next slide here, I'll show it in more detail. Here's where the depot would be next to the Ackerson Insurance property. It'd actually be further back than this. This was one of our early thoughts about where it could go. We'd rip up our tracks here. And then you can see how you could go out the back and go right into the train. So that was the thought there. Go on to the next slide. And this is another example that Dennis put together here. He put this wonderful design together to show what this would look like. And I don't know if that's pointer. Okay, so here's the depot sitting here. Here's 11th. Here's Grant. We're looking south, basically. Here's the depot. Here's Ackerson Insurance. And then the trains are out here. And so you would probably park in here. You could park along the street here and go into the depot. And then you could go out on ramps and stuff for handicapped people to get up onto the trains and see the trains. This same drawing is in the back of the room on both sides, if you want to look at it afterwards. Go to the next one.
We can bring that up in a larger scale at the end. Too.
Oh, okay, we can do that
I
too.
got another PDF we can bring up.
Oh, okay. So this is what it would look like. We photoshopped it. Through the magic of Photoshop, which doesn't cost as much money as moving the depot, we show what it would look like sitting at this location. So, next slide. So the timeline, what we're planning right now is fundraising between right now and the spring of 2019, let's say May or something. Try to get the funds together by then, and then move the depot sometime in the spring, summer, like, April, May, June, July, somewhere in there. We would then apply for grants to do more fundraising after we got it moved for restoration. And I'm just putting in here an estimate of it might take 3 years to get the money and get the building actually restored to functional use. And so we would open the building in 2023 or 2022, something like that. Just being realistic how long it's going to take to assemble money and get it restored and all this sort of thing. On to the next slide. The costs. First thing about it is the building itself is in very good condition structurally. We've had a number of these house moving guys go under and look at it and give us estimates. And so they've really been under the building looking at all the beams and supports and the joists and all that. And they told us that all that wood is dry and in good condition. This building is very solid. They think it would be really easy for them to move because their big concern is what if we pick it up and it falls apart? So they were definitely looking at structural issues. The brick on the side is in excellent condition. It's attached, actually it's nailed to the side rather than just sitting there, so it will not detach when you start to lift the building up. And they had a new roof put on it 6 years ago. It's kind of humorous. The railroad hired somebody to put on roofs all the way down the line, and they did. They put roofs on all the buildings down the line. Well, they never intended them to put on this building because they were going to get rid of it. But unfortunately, the guy had already put the roof on it by the time the railroad realized they were putting the roof on it, which is good for us and good for the building because it's had a new roof just 6 years ago. The interior actually is in pretty good condition. I'd say fair condition. It needs a cosmetic restoration. You get in the interior, and some of us have been in it. You walk in, you're like, wow, this is much better than I thought it was going to be, So it really needs ADA restrooms, HVAC, electrical and plumbing, and sanding of the oak floors, and more plaster work and repair, probably some insulation. The window frames are not actually in good condition as well, although I'm thinking we still might want to put more energy efficient windows in it, but the original windows and wood and rock is all in good condition. On to the next slide. So here's some information. I just want to show you some pictures of what the depot looks like, since you probably haven't had a chance to see it, and no one's been in it since 1960 probably. The building was built in 1912. Here's the waiting room. This is just 1/4 of the waiting room here, but it gives you an idea what it looks like. Next slide. This is looking the other direction, and the whole room is twice the size going this way, but they put up this false wall because they divided it into offices. So I didn't include those slides because it's hard to look through all these 2x4s to see. But the waiting room is a pretty decent sized waiting room. And then you go left here and you go down a hallway, next slide. And we go past the bathrooms. It's got the original restrooms from 1912, which is kind of interesting to see what they had. I'm sure at that time they were thrilled because most depots at that time didn't have restrooms. They had an outhouse out back. So this was pretty luxurious in 1912 to have actual restrooms and plumbing in the building. Keep going. So this is the hallway that goes past the restrooms to the other waiting room. And there's a ticket office on one side, And the restrooms on the other, next picture. Here's the women's and children's waiting room. Back then, railroad stations had two waiting rooms, one for those evil single men and the other for women and children. So, and then the ticket office in between to keep control of what was going on in the station. Anyway, so this is the women's and children's waiting room. There's another picture here. Now this is some pictures of the ceiling. You can see there's some paint peeling and all that, but it's not, you know, terrible or anything. And the floors, they haven't been varnished or anything for probably 50 years or more, maybe way more than that. But they look just like you could sand them and start and finish them again. They don't look, they're not heaving, they're not warping, you know. So keep going, next picture. Here there's a hole in the, you can see there's a little bit of a hole in the ceiling right there, but it's really just a minor thing to fix. It isn't any big deal. The rest of the ceiling is in fine condition. So we were kind of surprised how good condition the building was on the inside, but it hasn't had any TLC for probably 60 years.
I think they made that hole in the ceiling when CP was in there abating. They abated some asbestos out of the building several months ago. And there are several wounds in the building. I think that's why those holes are there.
Yeah, come to think of it, that is probably why they were there, because they did do an asbestos abatement of the building. They took out all the plumbing, they took out all the stuff connecting the building to the rest of the city, so then the wires and electrical, all that stuff we would have had to pay for. So they've already done it. They said they've spent $60,000 on the building getting it ready for demolition so far. So, now this is a picture of a depot down in Northfield, Minnesota. It's smaller than ours, but it's a brick depot, and I'm sorry the sun is not being very cooperative with us here. But this is up on wheels and dollies here, and here they're pulling it out of the location where it is. Go to the next slide. Here's the building up on blocks as they're building a foundation underneath it. And this is probably what we would have is something like this, where they would have the building up on dollies. And then we're talking about maybe putting a basement, or at least we got to have a 5-foot crawl space under the building. We're thinking just might as well just build a basement under it. But this is how they would suspend it in the air above the guys building the basement, if that was the way they did it. Go on to the next slide. Okay, here's the big question. What is it going to cost to move this thing? The building is about 130 feet long by 25 to 34 feet wide, so it's pretty big, but relatively easy to move. The movers thought this was very doable. And we looked into the moving, and it looks like the cost is going to be somewhere in the $250 to $350 range. When I made this up last night, I hadn't gotten a new estimate, and I got a new estimate from a foundation guy that was about lower than another guy's. So looks like I'm estimating $250 to $350, something like that, to get this building off of where it is, moved over on a basement and on a foundation, on a basement foundation. So about 50% of the cost is the move, 10% is the excavating the basement, excavating the dirt around the building so they can get under it. A new foundation is about 25%. And then we got to move power and utility lines to take it down the street. And then I just put in a contingency of 10 to 20%. So I think right now, the bare minimum, it might cost us $256,000 to move, but I think we better plan on 300 to 350. You just know there's going to be surprises. And this does not restore the building. This just gets it moved and sitting on a new foundation. I'm still trying to get estimates of what it'll cost to restore the building, but given the good condition that it's in, and given that it already has a new roof, it looks like a lot of this is cosmetic, and then beyond that, it's the heating, plumbing, air conditioning, and electrical that have to be restored and put in new. And I'm guessing that's another $100,000, $150,000. That could be a phase 2. We could do similar to that was at the house over in Mason City where they worked really hard just to get it moved so it wouldn't get torn down, and then a couple years later they were able through fundraising find the money to restore it.
I did Frank Lloyd Wright Stockton House. That took about 10 years for that to come around.
Okay, we hope this doesn't take that long, but next slide. So one of the things I talked to Mark Wicks here about grants and a couple other people, and everyone pretty much indicated there are no grants available for moving the station, but once you get it sitting on a new foundation, there's a lot of grants available to restore the building. So apparently grants aren't set up to move buildings, but they're set up for restoration of historical buildings. And the benefits to Charles City, and there's a lot of benefits here too, in the sense that this museum will probably bring tourism. I'm estimating 5,000 to 7,000 visitors a year. That's based on a similar museum in Bellevue, Ohio, a town of about 12,000 people, sitting in corn and soybean fields in Ohio, right off of I-80, about a couple miles off I-80. They have been able to get about 5,000 to 7,000 visitors a year. Some years they have gotten 10,000 visitors. And they found that the business community in their town thought this was just fantastic because it's brought people to their businesses. And here it is an example. People would for sure be spending money on restaurants, gas stations, and possibly motels while they're here. If they were just here for the day, they might spend $30 to $50 a person. If they get a motel, well, then it would be more than that. And again, like I say, who comes? It would be parents and grandparents with young children. Let's go to the train museum today with Johnny. And another benefit here is that it would improve the industrial area of Charles City, at least improve that area, give it a little more positive look at the end of Main Street there, at the end of Grand Avenue. And it would save an important part of Charles City's history for future generations. And in the end, having a museum, just like having the art museum here and a variety of other things, it really improves the quality of life in Charles City. So, next slide here. So, in the end, it's your decision. We have until next spring, maybe summer, to move the building. It's going to take a financial commitment by the community to preserve the station. I think it can be done. We have a purpose for the building. We have a place to put it. The trick is to get the money together, and I think if we pull our resources, we can make this happen. Next slide. And maybe put it there and get it rolling. And the next slide. This is just background, who I am, my phone, my contact information, and the name of the organization. We have now a PO box in Charles City. So in some ways, anyways, that's, I guess that's everything I have. So any questions or? The reason we ask for your phone numbers and stuff is so we can contact you and let you know about what we're doing and what's happening and how you might be able to be involved, or when there's a call for money. I'm not asking for any money right now. I thought the whole idea here would be to just give people information and let people think about it and digest it and let the community think about this. Because this isn't something we can do lightly. I think it's just going to take time and thought. And I think what we'll do is probably hold another meeting where we actually start asking for money, maybe a month from now, and give people some time to talk about this. It is going to be a commitment. And we'll certainly continue to look for some grants and other sources of funds, but it doesn't look like we could move this building for less than $250,000, probably $300,000, $350,000. So that's something to keep in mind. And once we move it, we don't have to restore it instantly, but that could be done over time. But once it's gone, it's gone. There is another town here, I think it was in Iowa, I'm not sure, a friend of mine was telling me about how they tore their building down, and now they're building a brand new replica.
Down by Swaledale.
Is it Swaledale?
If I'm not mistaken, yes.
Yeah, they tore it down 20 years ago, we don't need that, and now everybody's like, we want that, why did we let that go? And now they're spending probably more money to build a new building that isn't really the original. So. Any questions, or?
If there's going to be 7,000 people coming here, wouldn't you need a parking lot that holds more than 4 cars?
We will, but it actually, when you think about it, 7,000 people, we're going to plan to be open. We're going to do what Bellevue does. We would be open in April and May, and then in June, July, that would be on weekends. Then June, July, and August we'd be open 7 days a week. And then in September, October, we'd be open on the weekends again. And I asked the Bellevue people how many people they normally get, and he said, normally we never have more than 10 or 15 people on the property at any given time. And that's about 5 cars, probably. Unless there's a special
Does
event.
that equate to 7,000 people?
Yeah. Yeah, if you divide it out, I don't know if I've got that right with me here, but if you divide it out, just find it. Yeah, if you have 40 people per day and they stick around the museum about 2 hours, you'd have about 4 to 6 cars sitting in the parking lot at any given time.
Maybe that'll do it.
But we could certainly, we could hold a few cars there, but there could be cars along here as well. We can hold quite a few cars along 11th Avenue.
If you were to replicate the building instead of move it, like you mentioned somebody else did. To build it again in that type of construction, I'm sure it costs more than $350,000.
Oh yeah, this building was a high-quality building when it was built in 1912. They spent top dollar on it. That's why it's still in good condition, even though it's been drifting from a maintenance standpoint for a long time.
And this would have a tax exempt for property tax.
I guess so. I haven't gotten into that yet. I don't know about whether museums are exempt or not. I haven't even asked that question. But yeah, to build this building, this is about a 2,300 square foot building. So, I don't know, in today's dollars, that could be 750,000 maybe, I don't know.
200, 250 a square foot.
Yeah, so there you go, 500 to 700,000. Any other questions or thoughts?
Bob, just to add to the parking issue, there is some public parking available across the street, and the city's still looking at redesigning that whole triangular intersection there down the road where parking would be incorporated. So it wouldn't just be, it wouldn't be adjacent to the property, but there would be nearby parking.
Okay. I'm just figuring people can parallel park on 11th Avenue, I would think. Certainly if we have a special event, and I think we would have some events from time to time to draw interest to the museum, then I think we would, there would be some parking at that point, demand or whatever on a weekend or a Saturday or something like that. But
You could have curbside parking for
Be a curb, yeah.
half a dozen or so.
yeah, I mean, maybe we could do some special events. I know the Bellevue Museum does a car show once a year or something like that, And in some ways, we're similar to the Cedar Valley Engine Club out there, the Threshers Union. I was out there 2 weeks ago. Some of you recognized me from there. It was the first day we actually started having a table. And of course, it poured all weekend, but it's kind of funny. I got a kick out of this because this is exactly what we're trying to do, is create something like what they're doing, only with a different machine. So in some ways, we're both fascinated with the machine. It's just a different kind of machine and a different thing. But a train is very similar, just another toy to play with, I guess. Well, I see you've got it zoomed in there.
Yeah, we've tried to be real conservative about the concept that we've presented right now to keep it down to bare bones, because the real focus is salvage and save this piece of Charles City history and get it put somewhere safe. And the city engineer has some thinking about the way the street should be used and the parking, and we don't want to start imposing a bunch of conversations about whether there's going to be a street or parking here or parking there, when really the focus is, as a community, to come together and make sure that we take this piece of the past and move it forward so that it can be safe for future generations. I've placed the building in a location so there is enough room for that parking to be developed along 11th, but there's no reason to open that can of worms right now. So we're just showing it to you like this. And we've moved it back farther to the east to give the Ackersons a view to the north and feel more comfortable with the building, so that we have proper view for cars coming both from the south on Grand and coming on 11th Street so they can see, and we feel that this is a safe and comfortable location. Mr. Moore has to give up a little more of his railroad tracks, but in the long run, I think it will feel better for the city when it comes time to develop that site.
Yeah, we were on, I was looking for another property to put it on because I didn't want to give up the track space, because that's 2 less cars for 3 tracks that I can display trains. Because I run into a problem on the east end as to how, or east end as to how far I can go. So this limits the size of the train I can display. But, because we can display basically 4, 5, 6, 7 car trains. And oh, the other thing, we are keeping the portico of the building. I figured we would make this kind of an entrance and also kind of a picnic area for the kids and families. They could come out there and maybe, have an ice cream cone or some sandwich or something. And then the kids could watch the trains going by too. So I thought that would be a good use for that open portico area. I didn't know why that was there. I thought that was a place to stick baggage carts. And a friend of mine said, no, that open portico that sticks out from on the west end of the building, that's the breezeway. That's where if you're waiting for the train and it's a really hot night or a hot day, you can go out and sit out there and catch a breeze. So it was actually an additional waiting area back in the old days because they didn't have any air conditioning, so.
The original track side of the building is now on the north side.
That's correct. And that would be the same in this case. We keep the building exactly positioned the way it is, facing north.
Except it wouldn't be facing the train that you're putting, and you're losing track.
I'm losing track, but it would face, the building is exactly the same position facing north that it is now. We're just moving it south a block and a half, but in the same position it is now. And then the train tracks would be right across the street for the Canadian National. So you could still watch trains go by, they'd just be across the street. Is that what you're?
Yeah, it just seemed odd that normally the tracks alongside the railroad depot are right there outside the door.
Oh, yeah, that's
not
true.
across the street,
Right.
you know, and if, so it's backwards.
Yeah,
Because the train your trains that are gonna be on display are on the back side of the building,
Yeah.
not on the normal side of the building.
yeah, that's true. I don't have any real way to fix that because of that huge power line that goes right down the property. If we can squeeze a track in front of the building, we might try to do that.
You do have this one here, Bob.
But I think, well, that's possible. We may be able to save some of that track on the south side of the building.
It runs along like that.
Yeah, we do have that, and we might be able to keep part of the track there. But I couldn't get too close to the property line or Ackerson's, and we got the power line there dominating the scene on the north side, so it may make it difficult to put a.
Isn't there an entrance door on each side of that building?
No, actually, on the Action side of the building, south side of the building, there are no doors. There's a baggage door, but there are no public doors on that side of the
There's
building.
one right here, and these are doors
Those two.
here and door here. There's a baggage door back here, the luggage, and there's one here, but those are kind of overhead doors.
Yeah, they're big doors, yeah. Now, just to give you an idea of the layout of the depot, maybe put your hand, like, right here is the waiting room we first showed you. And here's the office, and above it is the bathrooms right in here. There's a hallway there. And then this is the women's waiting room, and then the rest of the building is a baggage room. So it's really simple design. It's just waiting room, ticket office, waiting room, baggage room. Now, our thought would be that the two waiting rooms, one could be maybe a gift shop area, the other could be a display area of historical artifacts. And then the baggage area, I'm thinking of making that into a little theater where people could, when they come in to buy the ticket, then they could go in and watch, you know, you go to a museum, they show you a little movie about what you're about to see. So show a little movie about some of the trains that they're about to see and the history of the American Passenger Train and that. So when they go out to see the trains, and we actually have a movie already available, we found one that's already made, we just gotta get permission to use it, that actually features most of the trains that we have here, because these 4 trains that we have for display are some of the, probably one of the 4 of the 20 most famous trains that were ever run in the United States. So we got some pretty cool stuff right here in Charles City.
I rode on that train in 1958, and I do remember it real well. Taxi took us up there at night, and we went in, that where you got your hand on that right now. And we waited in that waiting room. I don't think at that time they were using the other waiting room.
Oh, maybe not,
It was used
yeah.
for storage. And the REA, Railway Express Agency, I think they had their office back in there by that portico, because they always kept their truck under there.
Oh,
I think they had their office there.
that might be why those 2x4s are across the road. They may have been there for a long time, because it looks like it was set up as some kind of an office for
And there
somebody.
was a telegrapher there up in, into the 80s even there. I remember that they quit using it, but I remember talking, I can't think of his name anymore, but I knew him at the time. And they still use telegraph up until what, 80,
Could be,
78? 80?
somewhere in the 70s or 80s, yeah.
Yeah,
The last passenger train left Charles City, I believe, in 1960.
right.
And some of the Milwaukee Road coaches that we have could have easily been assigned to that train at one time or another going. It was a train that went from Sioux Falls to Madison, Milwaukee, and down to Chicago. Actually, I don't think went to Milwaukee, went right down to Chicago,
So
so.
we went to Madison.
Yeah, went to Madison, yeah. And left here in the evening, I think, and got into Chicago in the morning and vice versa. Chicago in the evening, got in here in the morning, and then continued to and from Sioux Falls area. It was called the Sioux, like the Sioux Indians, that was the name of the train, it was the Sioux. So Charles City once had what we call a named train, which is pretty cool.
Well, they were using old cars with wooden seats when I grew up. It wasn't very comfortable.
Hand-me-downs.
Would you like to walk them out of the museum and then down onto the field and onto the trains then too?
Yeah, we could do that.
Well, I fell asleep at
So, any other questions or thoughts, or?
So then once you bought your ticket for the passenger train experience, then you would go out one of these two doors and there'd be a ramp, the sidewalk would turn into a ramp. It would come up onto a platform that would be the height of the entrance into the train cars. And then you would be able to go into each of the different, the drop iron rockets, the Burlingtons, et cetera, and then all the way down the tracks, down to D Street, would be able to come out the ends and go down the ground and walk around and go up into the other cars.
Mm-hmm. My vision here, one of the ideas I got from this was for the Musical Instrument Museum in Phoenix. If you ever get to Phoenix, it's a brand new state-of-the-art museum. It was started by the former CEO of Target, of all things, because he collected musical instruments. And then he wanted to set up a museum, so he called all his millionaire buddies, and they got a hold of the Smithsonian, and they put together $100 million, and they built themselves a state-of-the-art museum in Phoenix. But it houses musical instruments from around the world. And you walk in, and they hand you headphones. And that's what I'm thinking, something with sound. They hand you headphones, and you walk in to the North American exhibit on the third floor, and then there's an African, it's all by continent. It's musical instruments by continent. So they have Asia, Africa, South America, Europe. And so you walk into the North American exhibit, and the first thing you come upon is a set